Hey guys, welcome back to the Laid Back Homestead. We are in the kitchen today and we are going to be preserving basil. Now, basil is by far one of my favorite herbs. And yes, towards the end of the season, I will just slap my harvest onto the dehydrator and save it dried. But while we are harvesting it fresh throughout the summer and into fall, I have different ways that I like to use it. So today I'm going to be making a simple compound butter. Okay, could not be any easier than that. A simple pesto, and the pesto that I make, I don't use pine nuts simply because where I live, they're not the easiest to find, and when you do, they can be quite expensive. So you may not consider this a true pesto, but it tastes just as good. And then the third thing I'm going to make is actually a basil vinaigrette. So kind of like a salad dressing. And I've never made the salad dressing before. So that will be a new to me recipe. I will go ahead and link a recipe to a more traditional pesto, which I will be basically following. I'm just omitting the pine nuts. And the vinaigrette that we're going to try today for the first time down below. So all that's left to do is get started. So in order to get started, you're going to need some basil, or in my case, a lot of basil, since I'm preserving it 3 different ways. And you, of course, can do this with basil you get from the farmer's market. I don't know what the going rate of basil is in a store. The last time I had to buy fresh herbs, I was so disheartened because it was so expensive. And herbs are just weeds that we think taste good. So I have a hard time justifying the cost of fresh herbs in the grocery store. I always recommend you grow your own. All right, guys, I just got back inside with all the basil we picked. My kitchen counters are a disaster right now. I'm cleaning up after a birthday party. So I filled this with water, and then I just come in with a splash of vinegar. I pre-rinsed the basil first in the sink. And now I'm going to soak the basil in this vinegar just to make sure we have no traveling friends that linger. And I'm going to let this sit until I have time to rinse it and prepare it. So after I have let my basil sit in the vinegar water, I went ahead and rinsed it off really well, and then I let it sit to dry. Now, full disclosure, my basil has been sitting here overnight, so I didn't take it out and separate it to dry like I should have, but that's okay because the way that I'm preserving this today, it's really not going to matter if it's damp or it's holding on to any moisture. So the next step is to get this off of the stems. I'm just going to go through, snap it off, and into my food processor. This is by far the most time-consuming part of this whole process. I do take the time to kind of inspect my leaves for any critters, just to make sure I'm not putting that in our food. I recommend putting on some music or a podcast if you're doing large bunches of this like I am, just to help pass the time a little bit. I think I'll go ahead and time myself just to see how long it actually takes, or if it just feels like it takes a long time. But anything that does have like a bug on it or something like that, I just take it and put that outside. This is why I just go through, not that it's a huge deal, probably for many people, but I have mealy bugs outside, so I obviously don't put those leaves into the food processor. So I'm working away, smashing this down. I must say the lettuce leaf basil is one of my favorite basils this year. I just love how big the leaves are. So it just makes harvesting for preserving really easy because it's just a lot of basil off of one plant. All right, so I've got this first batch loaded in here pretty good. I'm going to start here. I'm going to food process this down and then transfer it to a bowl. All right, full disclosure, I had this way too packed. So I had to take about half out so that it would process down. So I'm going to transfer this to a bowl and work in batches until I get all of the basil broken down. So I finished chopping up all of the basil, and I'm just going to go ahead and get that into the bowl. All right, so I have all of my processed basil right here. Now, I have several varieties of basil in here. I have the lettuce leaf, like I mentioned earlier. I have purple basil, maybe even a little bit of Thai basil, some lime basil, of course, some sweet basil. But because of the purple basil, it's not everything I make is going to be that bright green color. And that's okay, that doesn't bother me. But I just wanted to let you know, if you wonder why my basil mixture looks a little dark, it's because I did mix my purple basil in with the rest of them. If that's not your fancy, then you can certainly stick to one variety of basil that you grow. Most people typically go for just the sweet basil, but I like a variety. All right, the first recipe I'm gonna throw together is the basil pesto. So for this, you will need the juice of a lemon, some Parmesan cheese, olive oil, salt and pepper, of course, garlic, and the star of the show, basil. And this will come together very quickly. Now, of course, if you were following the actual recipe I have linked down below, you would also need some pine nuts. So I'm gonna eyeball how much basil I'm gonna put into my food processor. The original recipe I have linked down below calls for 2 cups of basil leaves, assuming you are making this without processing it. Because I'm okay with a good bit of pesto, I'm gonna use a good bit of our basil in this recipe. We will start there, and I'll see if I want to add any more. And I'm just gonna go in a generous amount of garlic, generous amount of Parmesan, salt, and pepper. This recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of olive oil. Again, when I make this, I just eyeball it. I start with a little bit and add more if the texture isn't right. And the last thing I'm gonna add is the juice of a lemon. I'm actually adding in the juice of half of a lemon because my lemon was really big and really juicy. And then we'll go ahead and get that all blended up, taste it, and adjust as needed. So I went ahead and pulsed it for a few seconds, but I can already tell I want a little bit more oil. And we'll give this another go. I finished processing it, and I just want to give a little bit of a taste test to see if my seasonings are on point. That is very good. So now I'm just going to transfer this over into the jar or container that you're going to store it in. And you can put this in your fridge and cook it fresh, or I have frozen pesto in the past and used it for future cooking. So I think I may leave this sit in the fridge for a few days to let the flavors meld, and then whatever I don't use next week to cook, or within a couple of days would be next week for me, then I will freeze the rest and use it accordingly. And I actually have ice cube trays that you're going to see later on in this video I'm going to use for the compound butter. But if you're looking to, freeze something in smaller portions, an ice cube tray is definitely the way to go. So I just have a cute little mason jar here. I think this is all going to fit. Our second recipe is the basil vinaigrette, which I was reading through the recipe and it sounds like it'd be really good on salmon. I'm going to use it for salad, but just as another option. So for the recipe, it calls for a shallot. I don't have one. So I'm going to just use a little bit of garlic in its place. Salt, red wine vinegar, crushed red pepper flakes, extra virgin olive oil, and of course, the star of the show today is basil. I just went ahead and gave my food processor a quick rinse. And this one, again, calls for 2 cups or 4 ounces of fresh basil leaves. So again, I'm just going to eyeball this. I know I need some from my last recipe. Since I don't have a shallot, I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of garlic. I don't want it to overpower it. A little salt, red pepper, Now, because I'm making this recipe for the first time, I am going to measure out my olive oil, so it calls for a 1/2 cup, and 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. I'm sure with anything you can adjust this to taste. And now I'm just going to mix this all together on high and see what we get. Well, it does look like it emulsified pretty good. All right, gonna give this a little bit of a taste test again, just to make sure I'm not missing any of the salt or pepper. I think that's perfect. And again, I just went and grabbed another one of these little mason jars to store this in. Try not to make a huge mess. It was bound to happen. And this one doesn't look like it made quite as much as the first recipe, but I also didn't measure out my basil properly. I was just winging that. And so I'm okay with that though, because this was a new to me recipe and I wanted to make sure I liked it, which I do. I think it'll be a really great addition to fish, chicken, pasta. I mean, I'm going to use it on salad today for my lunch. All right, so for the last recipe, I don't even feel right calling it that because it's just 2 ingredients. It could be more ingredients if you want it to be. Is butter and whatever herbs you want to add. I'm going to just do a straight basil butter today. I already have a few other compound butters in my freezer for different occasions, but I figured today I'm just going to use up the rest of what I have of our basil. I'm using 2 sticks of butter. Again, you can play with this. You can use 1 stick, 2 sticks if you want, you know, a thinned out basil flavor. Considering I don't know how I'll be using this to cook in the future, I'm going to use 2 sticks, but however you want to do it is fine. And all we're going to do is just mix this. It is softened. I've been letting it sit out the whole time we've been working. So you're just going to mix your butter into your basil. I normally do this in a bigger bowl, but I'm trying not to dirty up another bowl simply because I still have to get dinner going. And so I'm just trying to limit the dishes as much as possible. Now we just incorporate our softened butter into our herbs. I have so far really enjoyed cooking with these little herbed cubes because I will store mine in the freezer. So the softer your butter is, the easier it is to incorporate. My butter had been sitting out for quite a while, but I did go ahead and pop it into the microwave for a few seconds. You don't want it to be melted, obviously, completely, but you want it to be soft enough to where you can get it all incorporated. And now, this is good enough for me. I'm not a perfectionist when it comes to this, so I feel this is just fine. I'm gonna go ahead and get my ice cube trays and get this into them and pop them into the freezer. So I have this ice cube tray here. Each well holds about 1.5 tablespoons of butter. And I wanted to say, you don't have to store it this way. I do this for long-term storage, but you could easily just take your butter mixture and lay out a piece of saran wrap, plop it on there in the middle, and roll it up like a log and store it in your fridge and just slice it off as you need it if you want to enjoy it on toast or, you know, if you want to cook with it. But because I know I'm not going to be using this all right away, I'm going to store it this way long term. And again, I'm not a perfectionist, so I just take a spoonful and plop it in there. All right, so it's not the prettiest, but that's okay. I'm just going to take this and go put it in the freezer and pop them out once they're frozen and put them into a Ziploc bag that I will label with the date and what it is. Well, all right, guys, we have our basil butter, our basil vinaigrette, and our pesto. I just pop these right on out of the ice cube tray, put them in a labeled bag, and back into the freezer they go. All right, guys. Well, that was it. I was actually only in the kitchen for about an hour, and that included me removing all the basil from their stems. So all in all, this was pretty quick and easy to get done. And this is just 3 ways to help you preserve your basil, no dehydrator required. So thank you all for hanging out with me. And if you enjoy, cooking content, gardening content, homesteading content, I encourage you to subscribe. And until next time, stay blessed.